To pop in here today and see if I could get a couple videos made and talk about the things that God has shown me about my church. I started seeking Him about probably a year and a half ago or so, and really pouring my heart into prayer and devotion and abiding in Him. And ever since then, He has been giving me lots of dreams and visions. And specifically, I feel like this is it's an urgent time that we're in. A lot of people understand that things are coming very quickly and that God's judgments are about to fall. And there are a lot of people who are still not hearing. So I'm hoping that someone will listen to this. And even if it's just one person, that you will take it seriously. There's going to be probably one more video because there was a series of 2 dreams. So I will try to get that uploaded next. So I'll start by telling you the dream. So it was summertime, and my daughter and I were at the funeral of a 7-year-old boy. The funeral home was a lovely older white house, and I didn't seem to know who the 7-year-old boy was, but I don't remember feeling upset. In fact, I felt just the opposite. We were joyful. I went outside into the backyard and played with some of the children that were also at the funeral. From my view, I could see my brother-in-law sitting in a car in the parking lot of the funeral home. He had on very round, prominent glasses with thick black frames, and he was hiding behind the dash or the control panel and the steering wheel of a small, rundown old square car. It was maroon in color, and it had rust on it. He would not come into the funeral. I could only see part of his face from his nose up, with the glasses being the most prominent. As I played with the children, I kept looking out to see my brother-in-law in the car, and I was certain it was him, but I kept questioning myself because I couldn't understand why he wasn't coming into the funeral. I turned back to the children to play, and then would feel concerned that he wasn't coming inside, and I kept looking out to see him still sitting in the car. I did this 4 times, I believe. I finally went out to talk to him, and as I walked up to the driver's side, I briefly looked to my right, and then I turned my head to the left to speak with him, and the car just disappeared into thin air. Here 1 minute, and then poof, he and the car gone. And I stood there stunned, not understanding what was happening, and then that was the end of the dream. So it was summertime in the dream, and I believe that's a time marker for the work that God is going to do to begin. In fact, I think we can see this already starting. So my daughter and I were at the funeral of a 7-year-old boy. The funeral home was a lovely older white house, and a funeral represents a death of something or a termination of something old, or finality, or in other words, a final outcome of a subject matter. It was a white house, and symbolically a white house can represent the true, holy, and purified body of Christ, and those who abide in Him in a heavenly dwelling place. I didn't seem to know who the 7-year-old boy was, but I don't remember feeling upset. As I said, just the opposite. We were joyful. So I believe the boy represents the judgment of the rebellious sons and or the rebellious children, which explains why the funeral of the child was a joyful event. The dead son represents the seed of something, a ministry, a work, or an establishment, and or the sons of disobedience, meaning the children of the evil one. So 7 represents the completion or fullness or finishing of something, or a full cycle of something, which I believe is the end of the church age and the beginning of judgment, first upon God's house and then upon the wicked. To sum it up, 7 means the church age and the sins of the apostate church and the children of the evil one are completed or at their fullness. And it's going to vanish in an instant, as did the car and the religious system in the dream. Joel 3:13 says, "Put in the sickle, for the harvest is ripe. Go in, tread, for the winepress is full. The vats overflow, for their evil is great." I went outside into the backyard and played with some of the children that were also at the funeral. The children I was playing with, I believe, represent the remnant believers who are developing, trusting, and believing God the Father and Christ. They are dependent on Him and follow His commandments and stay true to His word. I kept looking out to the car and to my brother-in-law out of concern for those who refused to hear, wanting them to come into the funeral, but they wouldn't hear and they wouldn't come to the funeral. Going outside, I believe, is a reference to Revelation 18:4, which says, I heard another voice from heaven saying, Come out of her, my people, so that you will not participate in her sins and receive of her plagues. The backyard usually represents the past, and I understand that as a positive symbol, the backyard may represent God's hidden past preparation of His children for this time. I would say they are joyful that the past is gone and excited to live eternally, not looking back to Egypt or aware of their former lives, and have received rest, healing, and restoration, are walking with childlike faith with all their reliance on Christ. So my brother-in-law was hiding behind the dash or the control panel and the steering wheel of a small rundown old car. So it was square, it was maroon in color, and it had rust on it. He would not come into the funeral. I could only see parts of his face from his nose up, with his glasses being the most prominent. So why is this significant? So my brother-in-law went to a Jesuit university, and that's how we think of him. So I knew right away what God was trying to show me. He represents the Jesuit harlot Roman Catholic Church system, which most all of our churches are in bed with. In dreams, cars are most often symbolic of a church, a ministry, or a religious system. So the car, I believe, represents the apostate mainstream church system. It's old, that old maroon car, broken down and covered with rust. And we'll talk about those symbols. So maroon is a combination of red and brown. So red or scarlet as a negative symbol can represent corruption by sin, immorality or apostasy, a counterfeiting. It can also be a warning or indicate danger, and it can also symbolize worldly riches. Brown often represents clay, which is something made by men, and something that is not long lasting. Okay, it represents earthly works, dead faith, and being devoid of the Spirit. So these two mixed show a very clear picture. Rust can indicate a corrupt nature, spiritual filth, an evil influence, heretical teaching, spiritual neglect, earthly things that do not endure. It also represents a greedy accumulation of worldly wealth. So have you ever heard people say, don't put God in a box? Well, the square to me represents that box. God isn't in it. The steering wheel and the control panel are just that, the control of the churches by someone or something else. Hiding in the car is an indication something is concealed and hidden, and God is about to reveal it, I believe. Hiding can also indicate shame and neglect of duty, slothfulness, a refusal to recognize or deal with the unacceptable aspect of oneself, or a refusal to acknowledge the truth, and it can also show a hidden agenda. As I walked up to the driver's side, I briefly looked to my right and then turned my head to the left to speak with him, and he in the car just disappeared into thin air. Here 1 minute, and then poof, gone the next. I stood there stunned. I believe this is what God's judgment will look like, and it will shock the masses, and everything will change in an instant. God is showing a larger part of the real picture here. He wanted me to see the Jesuit hiding in the broken down car, which represents the church, or you could say religious system, and it's being driven by the Jesuit-run ecumenical system that's hidden behind the steering wheel. The Protestant church system with its ecumenical ties. And I want to be clear, I did not have this information before this dream. This actually led me to find the connection, which I did find, and in abundance. I left my church, which I'll probably talk about in the next video. Honestly, most people are unaware that the churches have been corrupted because they hide it so well. The whole goal of the Roman Catholic Church has always been to destroy us from within. It's behind closed doors where the people can't see or discern what's going on or what is true. And many pastors are either ignorant of the truth, having been taught lies, are lining their pockets, or are just like the status they've attained. Whatever the case, it's time to come out or you will be judged for their sins. And you do not want to be judged for the sins that they are going to be judged for, because their cup is filled with the blood of the martyrs and the blood of the saints. And I can't think of a worse punishment.